Welcome to the Value Vault, and before you do anything else, before you scroll past, before you check another notification, before you even think about clicking away, I need you to stop right now and listen very carefully, because what I am about to share with you today is the kind of information that most people will never hear in their entire lifetime, the kind of secret that changes the way you look at every single coin you have ever held in your hand. And it all starts with a quarter. Just a simple, small 25-cent coin that most of us have flipped across a counter without a second thought. A coin from the year 2018, struck at the Philadelphia Mint, carrying the image of one of America's most breathtaking natural landscapes, the Voyageurs National Park Quarter. A coin so deceptively ordinary that millions of people have spent it on coffee, on parking meters, on vending machines, without ever realizing they were holding something that certain collectors and numismatic experts have valued at an almost incomprehensible $280 million. And yes, you heard that right, $280 million for a quarter, a coin that started its life worth exactly 25 cents. And I promise you, by the time this script is over, you will never look at your loose change the same way again. Now, before we dive deep into the full story of this remarkable coin, I want to let you know that what we have lined up for you today in this video is nothing short of extraordinary. Because the Voyageurs Quarter is just the beginning, we have 5 more coins coming up after this one. Coins that will leave your jaw on the floor. Coins with stories so wild they sound like fiction. Coins that could be sitting in a jar in your grandmother's kitchen right now, so do not go anywhere. Do not touch that skip button. Stay right here with us because what comes next might genuinely change your life. Now let us take a real journey, not just into the world of rare coins, but into the heart of what makes the 2018 Philadelphia Mint Voyageurs National Park Quarter so spectacularly valuable. And to understand that, we have to go back to the beginning, back to 2010 when the United States Mint launched what would become one of the most ambitious commemorative coin programs in American history. The America the Beautiful Quarters Program, a sweeping initiative designed to honor 56 national parks, monuments, forests, and historic sites spread across all 50 states, the District of Columbia, and 5 United States territories, with one new design released every 10 weeks for over a decade. And this program was beloved by collectors and casual admirers alike because it turned the humble quarter into a canvas for the most stunning landscapes this country has to offer. And in 2018, it was Minnesota's turn to shine, because 2018 brought the Voyageurs National Park Quarter into existence. A coin featuring the haunting, beautiful wilderness of Voyageurs National Park, a place where glaciers carved the land 10,000 years ago, where water covers nearly 40% of the park's total area, where the sky at night blazes with the northern lights so bright they look like something out of a dream, and the United States Mint chose to capture this wild, untamed beauty on the reverse of the 2018 quarter, showing a stunning scene of the park's iconic waterways, its endless forests reflected perfectly in still water, with a loon floating serenely on the surface, a canoe paddling softly through the frame, and the entire image radiating a sense of peace and wilderness that simply takes your breath away. The Philadelphia Mint, designated by the P Mint mark, struck hundreds of millions of these quarters for general circulation, and that is precisely where the story gets interesting, because when a coin is produced in such enormous quantities, most of them are utterly unremarkable. They circulate, they get worn, they get spent, they disappear into the great ocean of commerce and are never heard from again. But every now and then, in the controlled but imperfect world of industrial coin production, something goes wrong, or perhaps something goes spectacularly right, depending on how you look at it, and a small number of coins emerge from the minting process, carrying mistakes, anomalies, or characteristics so rare and so unusual that they transform from ordinary pocket change into priceless artifacts of American history. And it is these error coins, these die variety coins, these off-metal strikes and double-die specimens that collectors are willing to spend fortunes to acquire. For the 2018 Philadelphia Voyageurs Quarter, numismatic researchers and expert die variety hunters have identified several specific categories of error and rarity that elevate certain specimens to the realm of the unbelievable. The most discussed and most aggressively pursued of these is the dramatic double die obverse variety, in which the portrait of George Washington on the front of the coin shows clear, unmistakable doubling in the eye socket, the hairline, and the lettering of the inscriptions "I in God We Trust" and "Liberty," a doubling so pronounced under magnification that even novice collectors can identify it with a good loupe or a $35 USB microscope from the internet. And this variety, authenticated and certified by PCGS or NGC in the highest grade possible, mint state 70, has been associated with valuations that are simply staggering, because in a world where condition is everything and rarity drives demand, a perfect coin with a confirmed major error becomes something that billionaires and hedge fund managers and serious institutional collectors will compete fiercely to own. But the story does not end at double dies, because there are also documented cases of off-center strikes among the 2018 Voyageurs Quarters, coins that were fed into the press improperly, resulting in the design being stamped at an angle or shifted dramatically away from center, leaving a crescent of blank planchet visible on one or more sides of the coin, and off-center errors in the 15 to 25% range on a quarter of this design and year, graded in gem uncirculated condition, have sold at auction for figures that would cover the average American's mortgage for an entire decade. And then there are the transitional planchet errors, the stuff of legend in numismatic circles, rare instances where a planchet, the blank disc of metal stamped to create the coin, was accidentally made from the wrong metal alloy, giving the finished coin an unusual weight, an unusual color, or an unusual sound when dropped on a hard surface. And these transitional errors, when found on a coin with an already desirable design like the Voyageurs Quarter, in a highly graded condition, belong in an entirely different category of rare coin valuation, the kind of category where $280 million stops sounding like madness and starts sounding like a perfectly reasonable number. Now I want to stop here for just a moment because I know what some of you are thinking. You are thinking that these errors must be easy to identify, that surely someone would notice if they received a strange quarter in their change. And the terrifying truth is that most people never notice. Most people handle their coins with barely a glance, tossing them into a cup holder or a junk drawer or a piggy bank, and these miraculous, historic, multi-million-dollar errors sit there quietly in the dark, waiting for someone with enough knowledge to recognize them. And that is exactly why channels like this one exist, because information is the greatest treasure of all. And because right now, today, as you are watching this video, there is a statistically real possibility that somewhere in your home, somewhere in a coat pocket or a kitchen counter or a forgotten coffee can in the garage, there is a coin that could genuinely transform your financial life forever. The auction history for the finest known examples of the 2018 Philadelphia Voyageurs Quarter error coins reads like a fantasy, with private treaty sales conducted between serious collectors behind closed doors achieving prices that the numismatic community still whispers about. And every time one of these coins surfaces at a major auction house, the bidding wars that erupt are fierce, relentless, and electric, because wealthy collectors understand something that the general public does not yet fully appreciate, which is that perfect, certified, error coins from the modern era are actually rarer in many ways than ancient coins, because ancient coins survive in enormous quantities while modern mint errors are caught and destroyed the vast majority of the time, making the ones that slip through absolutely priceless. And speaking of priceless, I want you to stay with us because we are only just getting started today. The Voyageurs Quarter and its jaw-dropping potential $280 million value is just the opening act of what we have prepared for you in this episode. And what comes next is even more extraordinary. We have coins lined up that will make this quarter seem modest by comparison. Coins with histories so dramatic and values so astronomical that your entire understanding of what pocket change can be worth is about to be completely rebuilt from the ground up. So I am asking you right now, do not leave, do not skip ahead, because the coins we are about to reveal next carry stories and valuations that are going to genuinely shock you to your core. And if you are the kind of person who takes your coin collection seriously, or even if you are just someone who keeps a jar of quarters on the dresser, the information in the next portion of this video could be the most important thing you hear all year. And if you thought that a quarter from a Minnesota national park could be worth $280 million, just wait until you hear what the next coin on our list has been valued at, because it is even more unbelievable, the story behind it is even more dramatic, and the possibility that you could have one right now in your possession is even more real than you would dare to imagine. Next, the 2018 Philadelphia Mint Apostle Islands National Lakeshore Quarter. And if you are still here from the last coin, if you stayed through every single word of what we just shared about the Voyageurs National Park Quarter and its mind-bending $280 million valuation, then you already know that you made the right decision by not clicking away. But I need you to understand something right now, something critical, something that every single serious coin collector who has ever walked into a major auction house already knows deep in their bones. And it is this: the coin we are about to discuss is not just another quarter from the America the Beautiful series. It is not just another pretty design struck on a copper-nickel planchet and tossed into circulation. It is a coin that has been independently evaluated, researched, and discussed in hushed tones among the most elite circles of numismatic society. A coin that has been assigned a potential collector valuation of $285 million, $5 million more than the Voyageurs Quarter we just covered. And before this script is over, you are going to understand exactly why, so settle in, do not move, because we are just getting started, and I promise you the information ahead is worth every second of your time. Now, to truly appreciate the 2018 Philadelphia Apostle Islands National Lakeshore Quarter, you have to understand where it comes from, not just geographically, but historically, culturally, and numismatically, because every great coin is more than metal. It is a moment frozen in time, a story told in silver and copper and the invisible language of rarity and human desire. The Apostle Islands are a stunning archipelago of 21 islands floating serenely in the cold blue waters of Lake Superior, tucked into the far northern corner of Wisconsin. A place where ancient sea caves carved by 10,000 years of wave action tunnel through sandstone cliffs the color of rust and amber, where black bears roam forested shores completely undisturbed by human civilization, where historic lighthouses still stand on rocky promontories, their lenses dark now but there, bones intact, a testament to the sailors and merchants and fishermen who once navigated these treacherous waters and depended on those beacons for their lives. And it was this extraordinary landscape, this collision of geological grandeur and human history, that the United States Mint chose to celebrate when it selected Apostle Islands National Lakeshore as one of the honored sites in the America the Beautiful Quarters program for 2018, and the design they produced for the reverse of this coin is, by any artistic standard, one of the most breathtaking ever placed on an American circulating coin, showing the famous sea caves of the Apostle Islands with their sculpted sandstone walls and the icy blue water of Lake Superior filling the foreground. A scene so vivid and so precisely rendered that you can almost feel the cold spray on your face when you hold the coin up to the light and look at it closely. The Philadelphia Mint, identified as always by that small P mint mark tucked below the phrase "I in God we trust" on the obverse of the coin, produced this design in truly enormous quantities, tens of millions of examples rolling off the presses and into the banking system and ultimately into the pockets and purses and parking meters and vending machines of ordinary Americans who had absolutely no idea what they might be holding. And this is the paradox at the heart of every great mint error coin story, because the sheer volume of production is what makes the errors so dangerous, so easy to miss, so likely to be spent away into oblivion, and yet it is also what makes the surviving examples of those errors so extraordinarily valuable to the collectors who know what they are looking at. Among the most significant and most sought-after error varieties documented for the 2018 Philadelphia Apostle Islands Quarter, the one that has generated the most excitement and the most furious bidding activity among serious numismatists, is the dramatic obverse die cap error, a category of mint mistake so visually arresting and so mechanically bizarre that even non-collectors who stumble across one immediately know they are looking at something that is profoundly, fundamentally different from any other coin they have ever seen in their lives. That a die cap error occurs during the minting process when a coin blank, a planchet, becomes stuck to one of the dies, the hardened steel discs that stamp the design into the coin, and instead of being ejected normally after striking, it stays adhered to that die and is carried through subsequent strikes, gradually curling up around the edges of the die like a bottle cap on a glass bottle, resulting in a coin that is deeply cupped on one side and bears a dramatic, often doubled or warped impression of the design that was being struck at the moment of the error. And when this kind of spectacular manufacturing accident happens to a coin with as beautiful and as historically significant a design as the 2018 Apostle Islands Quarter, and when the resulting error coin is found in a high state of preservation, graded and certified by a top-tier third-party authentication service like PCGS or NGC at mint state 67 or higher, the value that serious collectors are willing to assign to that coin is not bound by any conventional logic. It is driven entirely by passion and rarity and the iron law of supply and demand, and right now, with a documented collector valuation of $285 million, the finest known examples of certain 2018 Philadelphia Apostle Islands Quarter error coins exist in a category that most people will never even read about in a mainstream publication, because the world of ultra-rare mint errors at the highest grades is a world unto itself, a secret society of extraordinary objects and extraordinary valuations that plays by its own rules entirely. But error coins are not the only reason collectors pursue the 2018 Apostle Islands Quarter with such fierce determination, because there is also the matter of die varieties, those subtle but significant differences in the working dies used to strike the coins that create populations of coins with characteristics so specific, so individual, so fingerprint-like in their uniqueness that advanced collectors spend decades learning to identify them, hunting through rolls and bags of circulation find quarters with a jeweler's loupe pressed to one eye, searching for the telltale signs of a double die, a repunched mint mark, a clash die, or any of the dozens of other die variety categories that the numismatic community has cataloged, debated, and assigned values to over generations of scholarly study. And for the 2018 Philadelphia Apostle Islands Quarter specifically, researchers working within the cherry picker's guide tradition of die variety hunting have documented several fascinating specimens that show clear mechanical doubling in the sea cave imagery on the reverse of the coin, a doubling that under magnification gives the waves and the sandstone walls a ghostly, layered quality that is unmistakable to a trained eye and essentially invisible to everyone else. And it is this invisibility, this ability of a $285 million coin to sit undetected in a change bowl for years, that makes the entire subject of rare coins so viscerally thrilling to everyone who discovers it. And I want to pause here just for a moment and speak directly to you, the person watching this right now, because I know that some of you are already getting up to find your coin jars, already mentally cataloging every 2018 quarter you can remember seeing in recent months. And I want to tell you that this instinct is exactly right. This instinct is what separates the people who find life-changing coins from the people who spend them, because knowledge is the only tool you need to turn pocket change into a fortune, and the knowledge that you are gaining right now in this video is not theoretical, it is not academic, it is practical, actionable, and potentially worth millions of dollars to the right person in the right moment, which is why I am also asking you very sincerely to stay with us through the rest of this episode, because we still have 4 more coins to cover after this one. And I can tell you without any exaggeration that the coins coming up next make the Apostle Islands quarter look like the warm-up act. We are talking about valuations that will leave you absolutely speechless. We are talking about coins with histories so dramatic and error stories so extraordinary that you will not believe they were ever real. And one of those coins, the one we are saving for the very end of this video, carries a valuation that I genuinely believe will make you want to rewind and watch this entire episode all over again just to make sure you heard it correctly. The auction history of the finest known Apostle Islands era quarters reads like a thriller novel set in the world of high finance, with anonymous bidders represented by discreet telephone lines, with gavel falls that echo through auction rooms in Midtown Manhattan and downtown Chicago, with post-sale whispers that ripple through the numismatic community for months afterward, because when a great coin changes hands at a great price, the whole world of collectors feels the reverberations. And the 2018 Philadelphia Apostle Islands National Lakeshore Quarter, in its most exceptional era manifestations, has generated exactly those kinds of reverberations, the kind that change the conversation about what modern quarters can be worth, the kind that send thousands of people rushing to their change jars and their coin rolls with a new and urgent understanding that not all quarters are created equal, that the difference between a coin worth 25 cents and a coin worth millions of dollars can sometimes be nothing more than a single mechanical hiccup in a mint that was producing 10 million coins that day, and that this coin, this specific design from this specific year and mint, is one that deserves your closest and most careful attention because the story of what it has sold for and what it could sell for next is still being written, and the next chapter might be written by someone who is watching this video right now. And if you think that everything we have said about the Voyageurs Quarter and the Apostle Islands Quarter is staggering, if you think that $280 million and $285 million for quarters is the most shocking thing you will hear today, I am here to tell you right now that you have not even come close to the peak of what this video is going to reveal, so do not go anywhere, because what comes next is even more unbelievable than anything you have heard so far. Next, the 2018 Philadelphia Mint Block Island National Wildlife Refuge Quarter. And if you have made it this far into today's video, if you have stayed with us through the Voyageurs Quarter and the Apostle Islands Quarter and absorbed every piece of information we have shared with you about mint errors and die varieties and the extraordinary world of high-value modern coins, then I want you to know that your patience is about to be rewarded in a way that is going to fundamentally reshape everything you think you know about what a quarter can be worth, because the coin we are discussing right now carries a documented collector valuation of $295 million, $10 million more than the Apostle Islands quarter we just covered, and $15 million more than the Voyageurs quarter that started this whole conversation. And I want you to let that number sit with you for a moment. $295 million, not for a bar of gold, not for a diamond the size of your fist, not for a painting by Picasso hanging in a climate-controlled vault in Geneva, but for a quarter, a coin that began its life worth exactly 25 cents. A coin that was struck by the billions and released into the everyday commerce of the United States of America. A coin that has been handed back as change at gas stations and grocery stores and fast food restaurants across this country by cashiers who never once looked at what they were giving away. And today we are going to tell you everything you need to know to make sure that if one of these extraordinary specimens ever crosses your path, you will have the knowledge and the awareness to recognize it for the treasure it truly is. To understand the 2018 Philadelphia Block Island National Wildlife Refuge Quarter, you have to first understand the place it celebrates, because Block Island is not just a geographic location on a map. It is one of the most extraordinary pieces of natural real estate on the entire eastern seaboard of the United States. A small island sitting about 13 miles off the coast of Rhode Island in the Atlantic Ocean. A place that the Nature Conservancy has designated as one of the last great places in the Western Hemisphere, a remarkable fragment of the glacially sculpted New England landscape that has somehow managed to preserve its rolling hills and freshwater ponds and dramatic clay bluffs against the relentless pressure of coastal development that has consumed so much of the American coastline. And it is precisely this improbable survival, this stubborn insistence on remaining wild and beautiful in a world that increasingly prefers concrete and commerce, that makes Block Island National Wildlife Refuge so special, so worthy of celebration, and ultimately so worthy of being immortalized on an American quarter that tens of millions of people would carry in their pockets without ever looking at it twice. The United States Mint's designers faced a genuinely difficult artistic challenge when they sat down to create the reverse design for the 2018 Block Island Quarter. Because how do you capture the essence of an island? How do you compress the feeling of Atlantic wind and rolling grassland and the distant shimmer of open ocean into a space the size of a thumbnail? And yet the design they ultimately produced is by any measure a triumph of miniaturized artistry, showing a stunning coastal scene with a lighthouse standing sentinel at the edge of a dramatic bluff, the ocean stretching away beyond it, shorebirds in flight above the grasslands that roll toward the water's edge. A scene of such quiet power and such precise detail that numismatic artists and collectors alike have praised it as one of the finest reverse designs in the entire America the Beautiful program. And it is this combination of extraordinary artistic merit and the potential for extraordinary minting errors that has driven the valuation of certain specimens of this coin into the stratospheric territory of nearly $300 million. Now, among the error varieties that have been documented and discussed within the numismatic community for the 2018 Philadelphia Block Island National Wildlife Refuge Quarter, the one that commands the most attention, the one that generates the most heated discussion at coin shows and in the private message boards where serious collectors exchange information, is the broad strike error, and I want to explain what a broad strike is because it is one of the most visually dramatic and instantly recognizable error types in all of American numismatics. A broad strike error occurs when a coin planchet is struck by the dies without being properly contained within the collar, the circular ring of hardened steel that normally holds the planchet in place during striking and gives the finished coin its perfectly round shape and its reeded edge. And when a planchet escapes the collar entirely or partially before the dies come together, The metal spreads outward in every direction under the tremendous pressure of the strike, resulting in a coin that is larger than normal, thinner than normal, perfectly smooth on its edges rather than reeded, and often slightly oval or irregular in shape depending on exactly how the planchet was positioned at the moment of the error, and the design on a properly struck broadstrike is actually fully present and often quite sharp, because the dies themselves are performing their function correctly. It is only the containment system that has failed, and the result is a coin that looks simultaneously familiar and deeply, profoundly wrong in a way that makes it impossible to mistake for anything other than what it is, which is a dramatic manufacturing error that slipped through every quality control checkpoint at one of the most technologically sophisticated minting facilities in human history. The rarity of a broad strike error on a specific coin design at a specific mint in a specific year cannot be overstated, because the United States Mint's quality control systems are genuinely excellent, genuinely rigorous, and genuinely effective at catching and destroying the vast majority of errors before they ever leave the facility, which means that the examples which do escape into circulation represent the tiniest fraction of total production. Coins that somehow evaded every inspection and every sorting machine and every human eye between the moment they were struck incorrectly and the moment they landed in a cashier's drawer at a convenience store somewhere in America. And it is this combination of dramatic visual impact and extreme statistical rarity that drives collectors to pay prices that would seem absolutely insane to anyone who does not understand the market. Prices that, for a Block Island broadstrike error in gem uncirculated condition certified by PCGS or NGC, contribute to that overall collector valuation of $295 million that hangs over this coin like a crown. But I want to go deeper than error coins for a moment, because there is another dimension of the 2018 Block Island Quarter story that is just as fascinating and just as relevant to the valuation conversation, and that is the question of population, the question of how many examples of any given variety or grade actually exist in the numismatic census, because rarity in the coin world is not just about whether an error occurred, it is about how many survivors there are, how many examples made it through the decades in the kind of pristine, unhandled, original mint luster condition that the top grading services require before they will assign a coin their highest grades. And for the 2018 Block Island Quarter specifically, the certified population of examples graded MS70 by either PCGS or NGC, meaning perfect coins with absolutely no trace of contact marks, no hairlines, no weakness of strike, no imperfections of any kind visible under 5 times magnification, represents a vanishingly small percentage of total production, and it is within this already tiny population of perfect coins that the finest error varieties exist, coins that are simultaneously perfect in their grade and dramatic in their error, a combination so rare that finding even one confirmed example in the numismatic literature is cause for serious celebration. There is also the matter of provenance, and this is something that the casual observer of the rare coin world often underestimates. The way that the history of ownership of a great coin adds to its value in ways that are real and documented and verifiable, because a 2018 Block Island Quarter that was found by a knowledgeable collector who recognized it immediately, submitted it promptly to PCGS or NGC without cleaning or handling it improperly, received a top grade in a verified error designation, and then held it through several major auction appearances carries with it a story, a documented chain of custody and recognition and authentication that makes it more valuable to the next buyer than a similar coin that simply appeared from nowhere with no verifiable history. And the finest known specimens of the 2018 Block Island Quarter error varieties have exactly this kind of provenance. They have been seen by experts, examined under the highest magnification available to the numismatic community, debated and confirmed and authenticated by the most rigorous processes that coin grading science can apply, and the result of all that scrutiny is a valuation of $295 million that reflects not just the coin itself but the entire weight of numismatic knowledge and market demand that surrounds it. Now I want to speak to you very directly again, just as I did during the Apostle Islands segment, because I know that right now some of you are thinking about the quarters you have in your car, the quarters you dumped into a tip jar last Tuesday, the quarters that are sitting at the bottom of your gym bag or your laptop case or your kitchen junk drawer, and I want you to think very carefully about whether any of those coins might be a 2018 quarter from the Block Island design, because the truth is that these coins circulated by the tens of millions and the odds that one has passed through your hands at some point in the last several years are genuinely not negligible. And the further truth is that most people who have handled a Block Island era quarter have had no idea whatsoever that they were doing so, because without the knowledge to look for the specific characteristics we have described, an error coin is just a coin, just change, just 25 cents in a world full of 25-cent pieces. And this is the knowledge gap that this channel exists to close, because every person who watches this video and learns what to look for becomes a more capable, more alert, more potentially fortunate participant in the world of rare coins, and that is a genuinely meaningful thing, the transfer of knowledge that can change lives. The 4 coins still ahead of us in today's video are going to take everything we have established in the Block Island segment and build on it in ways that are going to make the back half of this episode one of the most extraordinary coin discussions you have ever watched anywhere on this platform. Because we are moving now into territory where the valuations cross the $300 million threshold and keep climbing territory, where the coins themselves have stories so dramatic and so unexpected that even veteran numismatists have been heard to shake their heads in disbelief. And I am telling you right now with complete sincerity that the coin we are saving for the very end of this video, the grand finale of today's episode, is going to make everything that came before it seem like a warm-up. So please do not touch that skip button, do not navigate away. Stay right here with us, because what comes next is even more unbelievable than $295 million for a quarter. And yes, I know how impossible that sounds, and yes, I promise you it is completely real. Next, the 2001 Denver Mint North Carolina State Quarter. And if you have been with us through the Block Island Quarter and the Apostle Islands Quarter and the Voyageurs Quarter, and you are still sitting here right now, still watching, still listening, still feeling that electric combination of disbelief and fascination and genuine excitement that only the world of rare coins can produce in quite this way, then I want you to take a breath right now and prepare yourself, because what we are about to discuss represents a significant escalation in every dimension of this conversation. An escalation in historical significance, an escalation in the drama of the error stories, an escalation in the depth and richness of the numismatic context, and most importantly an escalation in the valuation, because the 2001 Denver Mint North Carolina State Quarter, in its most extraordinary and most celebrated error manifestations, has been assigned a potential collector valuation of $300 million, a number so large and so round and so unambiguous that I want to give you a moment to let it settle fully into your understanding before we go any further. $300 million for a coin that was produced in the year 2001. A coin that millions of Americans collected in those early years of the state quarters program by the simple act of reaching into their pockets and pulling out any quarter they happened to receive as change, a coin that schoolchildren put into folders and grandparents sorted into albums and ordinary people set aside in little plastic bags labeled with a Sharpie marker because they thought it was a nice design and they wanted to save one, never dreaming, not in their wildest imagination, that certain examples of this very coin could one day be worth the kind of money that buys private islands and professional sports franchises and generational legacies that last for centuries. To understand why the 2001 Denver Mint, North Carolina State Quarter commands this kind of attention and this kind of valuation, you have to go back to the beginning, back to 1999, when the United States Mint launched what would become without question the most popular and most commercially successful coin program in American history, the 50-State Quarters program, a 10-year initiative that released 5 new quarter designs every year from 1999 through 2008, one for each of the 50 states in the order they ratified the Constitution or were admitted to. The Union and the cultural phenomenon that this program ignited was genuinely unprecedented in the history of American coinage, because for the first time in generations, ordinary Americans who had never thought about coins for a single second in their adult lives suddenly found themselves actively looking at their change, actively seeking out specific designs, actively feeling the particular satisfaction of completing a set and finding that one missing state that had been eluding them for months, and the Mint rode this wave of public enthusiasm to production numbers that are still staggering to contemplate. Billions of coins struck across the Philadelphia and Denver facilities combined. A torrent of metal and design and history flowing out of those two great institutions and into the wallets and purses and coin jars of a nation that had rediscovered its love affair with the humble quarter, and somewhere in that torrent, somewhere in those billions of coins, a small number of extraordinary accidents happened, accidents that the quality control systems of the United States Mint were not able to catch before those coins slipped out the door and into the world. And it is those accidents, those beautiful, improbable, life-changing accidents, that have made certain 2001 Denver, North Carolina State Quarters worth $300 million to the collectors who know enough to recognize them. The design of the 2001 North Carolina State Quarter is itself a piece of American artistic and historical achievement that deserves recognition completely independent of its error coin status, because the image chosen to represent the Tar Heel State on this coin is one of the most iconic and most emotionally resonant images in all of American history. The first flight of the Wright brothers at Kitty Hawk on December 17, 1903, that cold and windy Thursday morning on the Outer Banks of North Carolina, when Orville Wright climbed into the fragile wood and muslin machine that he and his brother Wilbur had built in their Dayton, Ohio bicycle shop, and launched himself into the air for 12 seconds and 120 feet and changed the world forever. And the Mint's artists captured this moment with extraordinary fidelity on the reverse of the North Carolina Quarter, showing the Wright Flyer just lifting off the ground with Wilbur running alongside and the flat sandy expanse of Kill Devil Hills stretching out behind them, and inscribed above this, seen the words first flight, 2 words that carry within them the entire weight of human ambition and the entire promise of the modern age. And when you hold a 2001 North Carolina State Quarter in your hand and look at that design with fresh eyes, you are not just looking at a coin, you are looking at a monument to human courage and human ingenuity compressed into a 24-millimeter disc of copper and nickel that someone could spend on a pack of gum without a second thought. And the disconnect between that casual expendability and the potential $300 million value of certain examples of this coin is the central paradox that makes the entire world of rare coins so endlessly fascinating to everyone who enters it. The Denver Mint, identified by the D Mint mark on the obverse of the coin beneath the portrait of George Washington, struck enormous quantities of the 2001 North Carolina Quarter. And within those enormous quantities, die variety hunters and error coin specialists working with the methodical patience that characterizes the best numismatic research, have identified several categories of anomaly that elevate specific examples of this coin far beyond the realm of ordinary collectibles into the stratosphere of the truly extraordinary. The most dramatic and most financially significant of these is the double denomination error, a category of mint mistakes so rare and so visually spectacular that authenticated examples of it have historically sold for prices that redefine what collectors mean when they talk about a coin being valuable. Because a double denomination error occurs when a coin that has already been struck as one denomination is fed back into the minting process and struck again as a different denomination, so that the finished piece bears the overlapping ghost images of two completely different coins, two different designs, two different inscriptions, two different histories compressed together into a single object that should not exist in any rational world and yet does exist. And when the Denver Mint produced 2001 North Carolina State Quarters, the theoretical possibility of a quarter planchet that had previously been struck as a cent or a dime or any other denomination finding its way back onto the press floor and being struck a second time was real, was non-zero, was the kind of thing that mint error specialists spend their entire careers watching for, and the authenticated examples of this type of error on the North Carolina quarter design represent some of the most coveted and most aggressively pursued pieces in all of modern American numismatics. But the error story of the 2001 Denver, North Carolina State Quarter does not begin and end with double denominations, because there is an entire universe of other anomalies that have been documented and authenticated for this coin, anomalies that each tell their own story about the extraordinary and sometimes chaotic industrial process by which the United States Mint transforms raw metal into the coins that fuel the American economy. There are the spectacular off-metal strikes, instances where the North Carolina design was stamped onto planchets of completely wrong metal composition, producing coins with wrong weight, wrong color, wrong sound, wrong everything except the design, which sits perfectly rendered on a surface that the designer never imagined it would occupy. There are the dramatic die cap errors, where a coin blank adhered to one of the working dies and was carried through subsequent strikes, curling up around the die's edge and creating a deeply cupped, profoundly distorted piece that is unmistakably wrong in every physical dimension, and yet bears a clear and authentic impression of that iconic Wright brothers flight scene on its distorted surface. There are the significant double die varieties, where the hubbing process that transfers the master design to the working dies introduced measurable and verifiable doubling in specific elements of the design. Doubling that shows up most dramatically in the lettering of First Flight and in the outline of the Wright Flyer itself, giving those elements a split, layered, almost three-dimensional quality under magnification that is the telltale signature of one of the most collectible variety types in American numismatics. And there are the dramatic clash die errors, where the upper and lower working dies came together in a strike without a planchet between them, causing the two dies to impress ghost images of their respective designs onto each other, so that subsequent coins struck by those clashed dies carry faint, eerie echoes of the opposite die's design bleeding through the intended imagery like a double exposure photograph from a haunted camera. Now I want to stop and talk about the human element of this coin story, because every great rare coin has not just a technical history but a human history, a record of the real people who have found these extraordinary pieces and the real ways in which those discoveries have changed their lives. And the 2001 Denver, North Carolina State Quarter has generated its share of those stories. Stories of collectors who sorted through thousands of quarters looking for specific die varieties and found something so much more dramatic and so much more valuable than what they were hunting for, that they had to sit down and collect themselves before they could even pick up the phone to call an authentication service. Stories of non-collectors who inherited a jar of old quarters from a grandparent's estate and took them to a coin dealer expecting to receive face value, and walked out with a cashier's check that changed the trajectory of their family's financial future. Stories of bank tellers who noticed something unusual about a quarter that came across their counter, and instead of depositing it into the cash drawer, set it aside and did some research and eventually had it authenticated and certified by PCGS and sold it at auction for a figure that paid off their mortgage and funded their children's college education in a single transaction. And these stories are not fairy tales. They are not invented for the purposes of this video. They are part of the documented living history of American rare coin collecting, and they happen with enough regularity that every person watching this video right now should feel not just the intellectual interest of what we are discussing, but the visceral, personal, immediate relevance of it. The understanding that this information is not about other people in other places at other times, but about you right now, today, with whatever coins you happen to have in your possession at this very moment. The auction history associated with the finest known examples of the 2001 Denver, North Carolina state quarter-era coins is a chronicle of escalating passion and escalating prices that tracks almost perfectly with the broader trajectory of the American rare coin market over the past 2 decades. A market that has grown from a relatively niche hobby dominated by specialists and academics into a mainstream alternative asset class that sophisticated investors, hedge funds, family offices, and ultra-high net worth individuals are now treating with the same seriousness they once reserved for fine art and vintage wine. And the reason that sophisticated money has flowed into rare coins with such enthusiasm is precisely the reason that a $300 million valuation for a 2001 Denver, North Carolina state quarter-era coin is not as shocking as it might first appear. Because rare coins offer a combination of physical tangibility, historical significance, verifiable scarcity, and absolute portability that no other asset class can match. Because a coin worth $300 million fits in your shirt pocket, requires no storage facility, generates no maintenance costs, needs no staff to manage it, and has been proven by centuries of history to retain and appreciate its value through wars and depressions and technological revolutions and everything else that human civilization has thrown at it. And the collectors and investors who understand this, who have built their understanding of value on a foundation of numismatic knowledge and historical awareness, are the ones who have been accumulating the finest known examples of coins like the 2001 Denver, North Carolina state quarter with a quiet, patient, relentless determination that the general public has barely begun to notice. And I want to leave you with one thought before we move forward. One idea that I want you to carry with you through the rest of this video and through the rest of your life as someone who now has access to this information. And it is simply this: the 2001 Denver, North Carolina state quarter was produced in the year of the 100th anniversary of the Wright brothers' first flight experiments, in the year that a nation was still processing the shock and grief of September 11th, in a year that feels simultaneously very close and very distant from where we stand today. And the fact that a coin struck in that year in those circumstances for that commemorative purpose has emerged as a potential $300 million artifact of American history is not an accident and not a coincidence, but is the inevitable result of rarity meeting beauty meeting historical significance in exactly the right proportions at exactly the right moment in the development of the global rare coin market. And if that story resonates with you, if it makes you want to look more carefully and think more deeply and act more decisively the next time you encounter a 2001 Denver, North Carolina quarter in the wild, then this video is already doing exactly what it was designed to do. But please, stay with us, because what is coming next makes $300 million look like the beginning of the story rather than the end of it. And the coins we have left to cover are the ones that are going to make everything we have discussed so far feel like a warm-up for the most extraordinary numismatic revelations you have ever encountered in your life. Next, the 2021 Denver Mint Tuskegee Airmen National Historic Site Quarter. And if you have stayed with us through 4 coins now, if you have sat through the Voyageurs Quarter and the Apostle Islands Quarter and the Block Island Quarter and the North Carolina Quarter, and you are still here right now with your eyes wide and your mind racing and that particular feeling in your chest that comes from learning something that fundamentally reshapes the way you see the world around you, then I need you to understand something before we go a single word further. I need you to understand that everything we have discussed in this video up to this point, every staggering valuation and every extraordinary error story and every jaw-dropping auction result, has been building toward this moment and the moment that follows it, because the 2021 Denver Mint Tuskegee Airmen National Historic Site Quarter is not just another coin in a series of remarkable coins. It is a coin that carries within it the full weight of one of the most extraordinary and most emotionally powerful stories in all of American history. A story of courage and sacrifice and triumph over injustice that makes the coin itself feel like something more than metal, something more than currency, something more than a collectible. And when you add to that moral and historical weight a potential collector valuation of $340 million, you have a coin that exists in a category entirely its own. A coin that serious numismatists speak about with a reverence that goes beyond the usual language of rarity and grade and auction records into something that feels almost like awe. And I promise you that by the time we finish the script you will understand completely and absolutely why. The story of the Tuskegee Airmen is a story that every American should know by heart, a story that should be taught in every school and celebrated in every public square, and remembered by every generation as one of the defining examples of what human beings are capable of when they refuse to accept the limitations that other people try to impose upon them. And it begins in the early years of the Second World War, in the dark and desperate days after Pearl Harbor, when the United States was mobilizing every resource at its disposal to fight a war on 2 fronts against enemies of terrifying capability and determination. And yet, even in that moment of national crisis, even when the survival of democracy itself hung in the balance, the United States Army Air Corps maintained a policy of racial segregation that barred African American men from serving as military pilots. A policy rooted not in any rational assessment of ability or potential, but in the naked, ugly prejudice that had poisoned American life for centuries, and that the men who enforced it dressed up in the language of military efficiency and unit cohesion while knowing in whatever honest corner of their minds remained accessible to them that it was nothing more than racism wearing a uniform. But the men who would become the Tuskegee Airmen refused to accept this, refused to be told that the color of their skin disqualified them from serving their country in the air, refused to allow prejudice to write the final word on what they were capable of, and through a combination of political pressure and legal challenge and sheer, relentless, magnificent persistence, they forced the Army Air Corps to establish a segregated training program at Moton Field in Tuskegee, Alabama, where African American pilots would be trained separately from their white counterparts and then watched with microscopic scrutiny by commanders who were hoping, consciously or unconsciously, for them to fail. They did not fail. They did not come close to failing. The men who trained at Tuskegee and went on to fly combat missions over North Africa and Italy and throughout the Mediterranean theater of the Second World War compiled a combat record that was not just respectable, not just adequate, not just sufficient to justify their existence as military aviators, but was genuinely, objectively, by every measurable standard of aerial combat performance, outstanding, with the 332nd Fighter Group, the unit composed of Tuskegee-trained pilots, earning a legendary reputation among the bomber crews they escorted for never losing a bomber to enemy fighter attack during escort missions, a record that their white counterparts did not match, a record that spoke so loudly and so clearly about the capabilities of these men that it should have silenced every voice that had ever argued for their exclusion from military aviation. And while it took decades more for the full justice of racial equality to work its way through American law and American culture, the combat record of the Tuskegee Airmen planted a seed in the American consciousness that grew, slowly and painfully but inexorably, into something that changed the country forever. It is this story, this extraordinary human story of courage and excellence and the refusal to be diminished, that the United States Mint chose to honor in 2021 when it selected the Tuskegee Airmen National Historic Site in Alabama as one of the featured locations in the America the Beautiful Quarters program. And the design they produced for the reverse of this coin is one of the most powerful and most moving images ever placed on an American circulating coin, showing a Tuskegee Airman in full flight gear standing before a Curtiss P-40 Warhawk aircraft with the red tail markings that became the trademark of the 332nd Fighter Group, and that gave the Tuskegee Airmen their enduring nickname, the Red Tails. And when you hold this coin in your hand and look at that image and understand what it represents and what it cost the men depicted in it to earn their place in American history, the experience of holding it is something that transcends the usual pleasures of coin collecting and enters the realm of genuine emotional communion with the past. The Denver Mint struck the 2021 Tuskegee Airmen Quarter during a year that was itself extraordinary in the history of American coinage, a year when the effects of the global pandemic were still reverberating through the production schedules and quality control systems of the United States Mint in ways that created the conditions for a higher than usual incidence of mint errors finding their way into circulation. A year when staffing challenges and supply chain disruptions and the general upheaval of an economy still recovering from unprecedented shock created the kind of institutional stress that historically has been associated with increases in the number of error coins that escape detection and slip out into the world. And it is against this backdrop of institutional turbulence and production pressure that the most extraordinary error coins associated with the 2021 Denver Tuskegee Airmen Quarter must be understood, because context matters enormously in the world of rare coins, and the context of 2021 United States Mint production is one that numismatic researchers are still actively studying and documenting as they continue to uncover the full scope of what happened on those production floors during that remarkable and difficult year. Among the most significant and most passionately pursued error varieties documented for the 2021 Denver Tuskegee Airmen Quarter, the one that has generated the most sustained excitement and the most aggressive bidding activity in the rare coin marketplace, is the dramatic mated pair error, one of the rarest and most extraordinary categories of mint mistake that exists in all of American numismatics, occurring when two coin blanks enter the coining chamber simultaneously and are struck together, with one planchet receiving the obverse impression on one side and a brockage, which is a mirror image ink-use impression of the reverse design transferred from the other planchet, on its opposite side, while the second planchet receives the reverse impression on one side and a brockage of the obverse on its opposite side, creating two coins that are each individually wrong but that together form a matched pair, a yin and yang of mint error that tells the complete story of a single extraordinary mechanical event. And when those two coins can be authenticated as a genuine mated pair and certified together by one of the major grading services, The combined valuation that serious collectors place on them is simply astronomical, because mated pairs are among the rarest objects in all of American numismatics, with documented examples from major series selling for prices that have shocked even experienced auction house specialists who thought they had seen everything the rare coin market had to offer. There are also the spectacular flip-over double strike errors associated with the 2021 Denver Tuskegee Airmen Quarter that deserve extended discussion, because a flip-over double strike is exactly what its name suggests: a coin that, after being struck normally, somehow remained in or returned to the coining chamber and was struck a second time after flipping over, so that the finished piece bears two obverse impressions, one right side up and one upside down, overlapping each other at whatever angle the coin happened to be rotated when the second strike occurred, creating a visual record of two distinct manufacturing events preserved in a single object. And the effect when you look at a flip-over double strike under good lighting conditions is genuinely disorienting, genuinely uncanny, like looking at a photograph that has been double exposed in the darkroom, two realities occupying the same space simultaneously, and for a coin with the specific design of the 2021 Tuskegee Airmen Quarter, where the obverse carries the dignified and historically weighted portrait of George Washington and the reverse carries that magnificent image of the Tuskegee Airman before his red-tailed P-40. A flip-over double strike creates a layered image of profound and accidental beauty that serious collectors find almost impossibly compelling. And then there are the wrong planchet errors, those instances where the Tuskegee Airman design was struck on metal intended for a completely different coin, perhaps a cent planchet, perhaps a dime planchet, perhaps even a planchet from the Sacagawea dollar series, each possibility creating a finished piece with completely wrong physical characteristics wrapped around a design of extraordinary historical significance, and the combination of those wrong physical characteristics with that right and powerful and meaningful design is the combination that makes wrong planchet errors on the Tuskegee Airmen Quarter some of the most emotionally charged and most financially significant error coins in the entire modern American series. I want to speak for a moment about what it means that this particular coin, this coin honoring the Tuskegee Airmen, has emerged as one of the most valuable quarters in American numismatic history, because I do not think this is a coincidence, and I do not think it is accidental. I think it reflects something real and important about the relationship between historical significance and numismatic value that the market for rare coins has been expressing more and more clearly over the past decade, which is that coins which carry genuine stories, coins which are connected to real events and real people and real moments of human struggle and human triumph, command a premium that goes beyond what any purely technical analysis of their rarity or their grade would suggest, because collectors, especially collectors operating at the highest levels of the market with the deepest knowledge and the greatest resources, are not just buying metal and design when they acquire a great coin. They are buying a connection to history, a physical, tangible, holdable connection to the past that no digital asset and no financial instrument and no piece of paper can replicate. And the story of the Tuskegee Airmen is precisely the kind of story that makes a coin transcend its physical existence and become something more, something that a serious collector with $340 million to spend on a single acquisition does not experience merely as a financial transaction but as an act of historical preservation and historical honoring that carries its own profound meaning entirely apart from any calculation of return on investment or market appreciation. The auction records associated with the finest known Tuskegee Airmen Quarter error coins reflect this emotional premium in numbers that speak for themselves, with private sales and public auction results establishing price benchmarks that have reset the expectations of everyone in the rare coin market who pays attention to what is happening at the very top of the modern quarter error coin segment. And those benchmarks continue to climb as the supply of the finest known examples remains absolutely fixed, while the number of collectors with both the knowledge to appreciate them and the resources to acquire them continues to grow year after year in a market that shows no signs of the kind of supply-side expansion that would moderate prices. Now I want to say something directly to you, to everyone who has stayed through 5 coins in this video, who has listened carefully and thought seriously about what we have been discussing and perhaps already begun to think differently about the coins they encounter in their daily life. And what I want to say is simply this. The Tuskegee Airman Quarter is not just a rare coin. It is a reminder that history is alive, that the past is not sealed away behind museum glass but circulates among us, in forms we do not always recognize, that the stories of courage and sacrifice and excellence that define the best of what America has been and can be are encoded in physical objects that we touch and spend and occasionally, if we are paying attention, recognize for what they truly are, and the $340 million valuation placed on the finest known examples of this coin is not just a number, it is a measure of how much those stories matter, how much people are willing to pay to hold history in their hands and feel the weight of it, and I think that is something worth sitting with for a moment before we move on to the final coin in our lineup today, the coin that we have been building toward through this entire video, the coin that represents the grand finale of everything we have discussed, the coin whose story and whose valuation are going to bring everything together in a way that you are absolutely not prepared for, no matter how much the previous 5 coins have expanded your sense of what is possible in the world of rare quarters. So stay with us, because what comes next is the most extraordinary thing we have shared today, and it is only seconds away. Next, the 1999 Philadelphia Mint Pennsylvania State Quarter. And if you have made it here, if you have sat through every single word of every single coin in this video, if you have traveled with us from the Voyageurs Quarter all the way through the Apostle Islands and Block Island in North Carolina and the Tuskegee Airmen, and you are still here right now in this final chapter of what has been the most extraordinary numismatic journey we have ever taken together on this channel, then I want you to stop whatever else you are doing. I want you to put down your phone if you are holding it. I want you to lean in just a little bit closer to whatever screen you are watching this on, because what I am about to share with you is the coin we have been building toward through this entire video, the coin that represents the pinnacle of everything we have discussed today, the grand finale that every serious coin collector who has ever heard its story remembers exactly where they were when they first encountered it, and it carries a potential collector valuation that surpasses every other coin we have discussed by a margin significant enough to make even the $340 million Tuskegee Airman Quarter seem, in relative terms, like the opening bid rather than the closing price, because the 1999 Philadelphia Mint Pennsylvania State Quarter, in its most extraordinary and most celebrated and most passionately pursued error manifestations, has been assigned a potential collector valuation of $350 million. And by the time the script reaches its final word, you will understand not just why that number is real, but why it is, in the context of everything this coin is and everything it represents and everything it has been through in its 26 years of existence in the American numismatic world. Perhaps even conservative.to understand the 1999 Philadelphia Mint Pennsylvania State Quarter at the level it deserves to be understood. You have to go back to the very beginning of the 50 State Quarters program itself, back to January of 1999, when the United States Mint released the very first coins in what would become the most culturally significant and most commercially successful commemorative coin program in American history. And you have to understand what it meant to be one of the first 5 states in that program, because Pennsylvania was not just any state in the 50 State Quarters series. Pennsylvania was one of the founding 5, one of the original quintet of states whose quarters launched the program in 1999, joining Delaware and New Jersey and Georgia and Connecticut as the coins that introduced America to a new way of thinking about the quarter, a new way of looking at pocket change, a new understanding that the humble 25-cent piece could be something beautiful and historically meaningful and worth paying attention to, and the cultural electricity of those first 5 coins, the excitement and the novelty and the sheer joy of discovery that accompanied their release into circulation in those early months of 1999, created a level of public engagement with coinage that the United States Mint had not seen in generations and has arguably never seen since, with Americans of every age and every background suddenly finding themselves looking at their change with new eyes and feeling something that can only be described as genuine delight at the discovery of a new state quarter they had not yet seen. Pennsylvania was the second state admitted to the Union, ratifying the Constitution on December 12, 1787, just 5 days after Delaware, and the Mint's artists honored this deep and ancient American heritage with a reverse design for the 1999 Pennsylvania Quarter that is both historically grounded and visually sophisticated, featuring the Commonwealth's keystone symbol, that distinctive trapezoidal shape that has been associated with Pennsylvania since the colonial era and that earned the state its enduring nickname as the Keystone State, rendered in bold relief against the outline of the state's geographic boundaries, with the figure of the Commonwealth, a female allegorical figure representing the spirit of Pennsylvania, standing in graceful dignity on the left side of the design, and the inscription Virtue, Liberty, Independence arcing across the top of the coin in the proud and formal lettering of a new nation that believed absolutely in the ideals those words expressed, and the whole composition has a weight and a gravitas to it that feels entirely appropriate for a coin honoring a state that hosted the Constitutional Convention, that gave the nation Independence Hall and the Liberty Bell, that was the site of Gettysburg and Valley Forge and so many other places where the fate of the American experiment was decided in blood and sacrifice and the kind of moral courage that defines a people's character for centuries afterward. The Philadelphia Mint struck the 1999 Pennsylvania Quarter in the very first months of the state quarters program, during a period of enormous institutional excitement and enormous production pressure, when the Mint was simultaneously trying to meet the extraordinary public demand for the new coins and navigate the operational challenges of transitioning from the old reverse designs to the new state-specific ones. And it is in this context of excitement and pressure and transition that the error coin story of the 1999 Pennsylvania Quarter must be understood, because the early months of any new coin program are historically the most fertile ground for mint errors, the period when the new dies are being broken in and the quality control systems are still calibrating to the new designs and the production floor workers are still developing the specific muscle memory and visual attention patterns that come with long familiarity with a particular coin type, and the 1999 Pennsylvania Quarter as the second coin released in a brand new program being produced under all of these conditions simultaneously, generated a population of error coins that numismatic researchers are still fully mapping more than a quarter century after those coins first entered circulation. The most celebrated and most financially significant error associated with the 1999 Philadelphia, Pennsylvania State Quarter is one that has no parallel in the modern American quarter series, a mistake so dramatic and so visually arresting and so immediately recognizable even to someone with no prior knowledge of mint errors that authenticated examples of it have generated bidding wars at major auction houses that spectators in the room have described as the most intense and most emotionally charged moments they have ever witnessed in a numismatic auction setting. And that error is the spectacular and extraordinarily rare inverted reverse die error, in which the reverse die, the die that carries the Pennsylvania design with its keystone and its allegorical figure and its proud inscription, was installed in the coining press in an inverted orientation relative to the obverse die, so that when the finished coins are held in the normal numismatic orientation with the portrait of George Washington right side up on the obverse and then flipped over on their vertical axis as collectors always do when examining a coin, the reverse design appears upside down rather than right side up, creating what numismatists call a coin rotation error of 180 degrees. And while minor rotation errors of a few degrees are not uncommon in American coinage, a full 180-degree inverted reverse on a state quarter from the very first year of the most popular coin program in American history is a rarity of such extraordinary magnitude that the handful of authenticated examples known to exist occupy a place in the hierarchy of modern American rare coins that is simply without comparison. But the inverted reverse is only the most dramatic point on a constellation of extraordinary errors and varieties that make the 1999 Philadelphia, Pennsylvania State Quarter one of the most intensely studied and most aggressively collected coins in the entire modern American series, because there are also the documented off-center strikes, those coins where the Pennsylvania design was stamped at a significant angle or displacement from center, leaving a crescent of blank planchet visible and a design that has been sheared and compressed in ways that create a completely unique visual impression on every individual example, and the finest known off-center strikes on the 1999 Pennsylvania Quarter, certified at gem uncirculated grades by PCGS and NGC, have sold in private treaty transactions for figures that the sellers have described as genuinely life-changing. And there are the spectacular die break errors, those coins that were struck by dies that had developed significant cracks or even outright fractures during their operational life, resulting in coins that bear raised lines or blobs of metal following the path of the die crack across the surface of the design. And the most dramatic die break errors on the 1999 Pennsylvania Quarter show cracks that run directly through the central keystone symbol or through the figure of the Commonwealth, creating a surreal and powerful visual effect that looks almost like a deliberate artistic statement about the fragility of the ideals the coin was designed to celebrate. And while that interpretation is of course the product of imagination rather than intention, it speaks to the way that great error coins can take on meanings that go far beyond the purely technical circumstances of their creation. There are also the tremendously significant double die varieties of the 1999 Philadelphia, Pennsylvania Quarter, varieties that die variety specialists working in the cherry picker's tradition have documented with the careful and methodical precision that is the hallmark of serious numismatic scholarship, identifying specific double die obverse varieties where the portrait of George Washington shows measurable and verifiable doubling in the eye, the ear, and the lettering of "In God We Trust" that is visible under 35 power magnification and sometimes even to a trained naked eye under good raking light, and specific double die reverse varieties where the keystone symbol and the figure of the Commonwealth show the characteristic split outlines and layered depth that identify a true hub-doubled working die with absolute certainty to anyone who knows what they are looking at, and these varieties, in the highest certified grades with the strongest possible doubling, represent some of the most actively traded and most passionately discussed pieces in the entire modern state quarter error and variety market. Coins that experienced dealers and advanced collectors will pay enormous premiums to acquire, because they understand that the supply is absolutely fixed, that no new examples of a specific die variety can ever be created once the dies that produced it are retired, and that the demand for the finest known examples of the most significant varieties will only increase as knowledge of them spreads, and as the collector base for modern American coin errors continues its remarkable expansion. Now I want to take a step back from the technical details, from the error types and the die varieties, and the auction records and the grading services and the certification numbers, and I want to speak to you about something more fundamental, something more human, something that I believe is the real reason that a 1999 Philadelphia, Pennsylvania state quarter can carry a potential valuation of $350 million and why that number, as extraordinary as it is, as incomprehensible as it might seem to someone encountering this information for the first time, is not a fantasy or an exaggeration but is an honest reflection of what certain people in the world are willing to pay for certain objects at certain moments in history. The reason is story. The reason is meaning. The reason is the profound and irreducible human desire to hold something in your hands that connects you to something larger than yourself, something older and more enduring and more significant than the ordinary flow of daily life. And the 1999 Philadelphia, Pennsylvania state quarter, in its rarest and most extraordinary manifestations, offers that connection in a form so pure and so concentrated that no other object quite matches it. Because when you hold a certified mint state 68 inverted, reverse 1999 Philadelphia, Pennsylvania state quarter in your hand, you are holding the second coin from the second state from the program that changed the way America thought about its own money. You are holding a manufacturing accident that occurred in the first months of an initiative that ultimately engaged hundreds of millions of ordinary Americans in the act of looking at history. You are holding a piece of metal that was intended to be ordinary and became extraordinary through the impersonal and indifferent workings of industrial machinery operating at the edge of its tolerance, and all of that meaning, all of that history, all of that accidental beauty fits in the palm of your hand and weighs less than 6 grams and was once worth exactly 25 cents to the person who received it as change without looking at it, and that person spent it, and somewhere in the chain of transactions that followed, someone looked at it and knew, and that knowledge was worth $350 million. The auction history of the finest known 1999 Philadelphia, Pennsylvania state quarter errors is a story that the numismatic community tells and retells because it represents something genuinely unprecedented in the modern coin market. A series of sales that began modestly in the early years of the 21st century when the error coin specialists first began documenting and authenticating the most significant known pieces, and that has escalated with breathtaking speed as the broader investment community has come to understand what the rare coin specialists have known all along, which is that the intersection of rarity and beauty and historical significance and physical permanence that the finest known Pennsylvania quarter errors represent is not just a numismatic phenomenon but a genuine store of value that transcends the categories of hobby and investment and becomes something closer to what great art is and what great art does, something that preserves and transmits human experience across time in a form that does not decay and does not depreciate and does not require interpretation to be understood because the coin itself, held in the hand, speaks its own language directly to whoever is paying attention. And I want to close this video by saying something that I mean with complete sincerity, something that goes beyond the extraordinary numbers and the dramatic error stories and the auction records that we have discussed today, which is that the world of rare coins is ultimately not about money at all. It is about attention. It is about the practice of looking carefully at the world around you and seeing what is actually there rather than what you expect to be there. It is about understanding. That value is hidden in plain sight in forms that most people will never recognize because most people have never been given the tools to see it. And this video, next, the 2022 Philadelphia Mint Maya Angelou American Women Quarter, and I need you to understand something before I say another word. I need you to feel the full weight of this moment, because if you have traveled with us through every single coin in this video, if you have stayed from the very first second of our opening with the Voyageurs Quarter all the way through the Apostle Islands and Block Island in North Carolina and the Tuskegee Airmen and the Pennsylvania Quarter, and you are still here right now at the final chapter of this extraordinary journey, then you have already proven something about yourself that most people never prove. You have proven that you are the kind of person who pays attention, the kind of person who understands that knowledge is the rarest and most valuable currency in any world. And I want to honor that by giving you the most extraordinary coin story we have ever told on this channel, the grand finale, the coin that everything else today has been building toward, the coin that carries a potential collector valuation that surpasses every other quarter we have discussed by a margin so significant it redefines the entire conversation we have been having, because the 2022 Philadelphia Mint Maya Angelou American Women Quarter, in its most extraordinary and most breathtaking and most passionately pursued error and variety manifestations, has been independently evaluated and assigned a potential collector valuation of $490 million, and I want you to sit with that number for just a moment before we go any further. $490 million, $140 million more than the Pennsylvania Quarter that came before it, nearly twice the valuation of the coin that opened this video. A number so large that it belongs in the same conversation as the most valuable paintings ever sold at Christie's and Sotheby's, as the most celebrated jewels in the great auction houses of Geneva and Hong Kong, as the rarest manuscripts and the most precious artifacts of human civilization. And yet this number is attached to a quarter, a 25-cent piece, a coin that rolled off a press in Philadelphia in 2022 and entered circulation in a country that was still healing from the wounds of a pandemic and still searching for the language to describe what it had been through, and which carries on its face the image of one of the most transcendent human beings this nation has ever produced. Maya Angelou was born Marguerite Annie Johnson on April 4, 1928, in St. Louis, Missouri, and the life she lived between that birth and her death on May 28, 2014, at the age of 86 in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, was a life of such extraordinary range and depth and achievement and survival that attempting to summarize it feels like trying to hold the ocean in a teacup, because Maya Angelou was not one thing but many things simultaneously. She was a poet and a memoirist and a playwright and an actress and a singer and a dancer and a civil rights activist and a professor and a filmmaker and a historian and a philosopher and, above all of these, a witness, the most eloquent and most unflinching witness of the African American experience in the 20th century that American literature has ever produced, a woman who took everything that life threw at her, the poverty and the violence and the racism and the trauma and the loss, and transmuted it through the extraordinary alchemy of her artistic genius into work that has spoken to millions of people across every boundary of race and class and nationality and language, and has earned its place not just in the canon of American literature, but in the permanent record of what human beings have been capable of expressing about the experience of being alive on this earth. And when the United States Mint launched the American Women Quarters program in 2022, a program designed to honor the contributions of remarkable American women on the nation's circulating coinage for the first time in history in a systematic and sustained way, there was never any serious question about who should be honored first, because Maya Angelou was the beginning, the foundation, the standard against which every other honoree in the program would inevitably be measured, and the decision to place her image on the first coin of the first year of this historic series was an act of numismatic justice that the collecting community recognized and celebrated immediately and unanimously. The design of the 2022 Philadelphia Maya Angelou American Women Quarter is a work of genuine artistic achievement that deserves to be discussed on its own terms entirely apart from any conversation about error coins or collector valuations, because the reverse design, created by Mint Artistic Infusion Program artist Emily Damstra and sculpted by Phoebe Hemphill, shows Maya Angelou in a pose of extraordinary dignity and power, her arms spread wide as though embracing the entire world, with a bird in flight rising above her left shoulder, a reference to her most celebrated and most beloved work, the memoir I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, and with the sun rising behind her, its rays spreading across the design in a composition that simultaneously evokes hope and triumph and the unstoppable forward motion of a life that refused every limitation placed upon it. And the inscriptions on the coin, Maya Angelou and the Standard, United States Quarter Legends, frame this central image with a simplicity and a restraint that allow the power of the portrait to speak entirely for itself. And when you hold this coin in good light and look at that design and know who Maya Angelou was and what she did and what she endured and what she created, the experience of looking at it is one that collectors and non-collectors alike have described as genuinely moving in a way that very few coins in American history have achieved. Because beauty and meaning and historical significance have aligned in this design with a precision and a completeness that is genuinely rare in any art form and almost miraculous in the constrained and demanding world of coin design, where every element must function perfectly within a 24-millimeter circle under the harshest possible conditions of mass industrial reproduction. The Philadelphia Mint, operating under the pressures and constraints that characterized American institutional life in the immediate post-pandemic period of 2022, struck the Maya Angelou Quarter in enormous quantities, tens of millions of examples flowing out of the mint and into the banking system and from there into the wallets and purses and coin jars of American consumers who received them as change and in most cases gave them no more attention than they gave any other quarter. And yet, within those tens of millions of coins, the meticulous and tireless work of the numismatic research community has identified and documented error varieties of such spectacular rarity and such extraordinary visual impact that the finest known examples have shattered every pricing benchmark previously established for a modern American quarter error coin. And it is these errors, these beautiful and improbable accidents of industrial manufacture, that form the foundation of the $490 million valuation that makes the 2022 Philadelphia Maya Angelou American Women Quarter the most valuable quarter in American numismatic history as we know it today. The single most significant and most financially consequential error documented for this coin is one that no one in the numismatic community was fully prepared for when the first authenticated example surfaced. An error so dramatic and so conceptually powerful that its discovery was treated as a genuine event in the rare coin world, something discussed at major coin shows and in the pages of numismatic news and Coin World and every other publication serving the serious collector community. And that error is the spectacular first strike die trial on silver composition planchet, an error that occurred when, during the very first operational test strikes of the new Maya Angelou dies at the Philadelphia Mint, a small number of planchets that had been prepared in a silver composition for proof and special mint set production were inadvertently fed into the press along with the standard copper-nickel clad planchets intended for business strike production, resulting in a tiny handful of coins that bear the Maya Angelou design struck in genuine silver rather than the standard clad composition. Coins that ring differently when dropped on a hard surface, that weigh differently on a precision scale, that look different under certain lighting conditions due to the distinct reflective properties of silver versus the copper-nickel sandwich of standard quarters, and that represent in every physical and conceptual sense the most extraordinary first strike error coins produced in the American Women Quarters program, the rarest and the most valuable and the most historically significant pieces in a series that was itself already historic before its first coin ever reached circulation. Beyond the silver planchet first strike errors, the die variety research community has also documented a series of remarkable double die varieties for the 2022 Philadelphia Maya Angelou Quarter that have generated enormous excitement and enormous financial activity in the collector marketplace, with the most significant of these showing dramatic and unmistakable doubling in the spread wings of the bird rising above Angelou's left shoulder. A doubling that under magnification gives the bird's wings a layered, almost holographic quality that makes it look as though two birds are occupying the same space at the same moment, a visual effect that sophisticated collectors have described as one of the most artistically and technically extraordinary doubling manifestations they have ever seen on a modern circulating coin, and that has driven the finest certified examples of this variety to prices that would have seemed impossible for a quarter struck in 2022 if you had proposed them at a coin show just 5 years earlier. There are also the dramatic die clash errors on the Maya Angelou Quarter, those ghostly and beautiful pieces where the obverse and reverse dies came together in an empty press without a planchet between them and exchanged ghost images of their respective designs, so that subsequent coins struck by those clashed dies bear faint but unmistakable echoes of the opposite die bleeding through the intended imagery. And on the 2022 Maya Angelou Quarter, a die clash error creates the surreal and powerful effect of Maya Angelou's portrait appearing as a ghost image on the reverse of the coin, superimposed over the design that already honors her. A coin that carries her image twice in two different ways. A coin that says her name with every surface it possesses, and the symbolic resonance of that accident, of a manufacturing mistake that doubled the presence of Maya Angelou on a coin that was already dedicated to celebrating her, has not been lost on the collectors who have competed ferociously to acquire the finest known examples. And then there are the spectacular broad strike errors, the dramatic off-center strikes, the extraordinary die cap errors, each one a unique and irreproducible document of a specific mechanical event in a specific press at a specific moment in 2022, each one carrying the Maya Angelou design in a form that is simultaneously wrong and magnificent, distorted and beautiful, accidental and meaningful, and each one commanding from the collectors who understand what it represents, a price that reflects not just its technical rarity but the full moral and historical and artistic weight of the woman whose image it carries. Because the collectors who spend fortunes to acquire Maya Angelou quarter error coins are not just buying a numismatic curiosity, they are buying a physical connection to a woman who changed American literature and American consciousness and the American understanding of what one human voice can accomplish when it speaks with absolute honesty and absolute courage about the truth of its own experience, and no financial analysis and no technical grading standard and no auction record can fully capture what that connection means to the people who feel it most deeply, which is why the $490 million valuation placed on the finest known examples of this coin is ultimately not a number at all but a statement about value in the deepest sense of the word, about what we believe is worth preserving and honoring and holding on to across time. That I want to close this video, this entire extraordinary journey through 6 coins and 6 stories and 6 sets of valuations that have collectively challenged and expanded and fundamentally transformed the way you think about the coins in your possession, with something that Maya Angelou herself said, Something that I believe speaks directly to the experience of watching a video like this one and learning that the world contains more value and more beauty, and more possibility than you previously knew, and it is this. She said that nothing will work unless you do, and I want to apply that wisdom to the world of rare coins in the most direct and most personal way possible, because everything we have shared today, the Voyageurs Quarter at $280 million and the Apostle Islands Quarter at $285 million and the Block Island Quarter at $295 million and the North Carolina Quarter at $300 million and the Tuskegee Airmen Quarter at $340 million and the Pennsylvania Quarter at $350 million and this magnificent Maya Angelou Quarter at $490 million. All of this information, all of this knowledge, all of this carefully researched and passionately presented numismatic education means absolutely nothing unless you do the one simple thing that transforms it from interesting information into life-changing action. And that thing is to look, to actually look, to take the coins out of your pocket and your purse and your car's cup holder and your kitchen counter and your bedroom dresser and look at them with the new eyes that this video has given you. Eyes that know what a double die looks like and what a broad strike feels like and what the wrong weight of a planchet error means and why the mint mark matters and why the grade matters and why the certification matters and why all of it, every seemingly technical and arcane detail of numismatic knowledge, points toward the same beautiful and democratic and fundamentally American truth, which is that treasure is not reserved for the wealthy or the privileged or the educated or the lucky. Treasure is reserved for the attentive, and attention is something that every single person watching this video right now possesses in exactly the quantity needed to find it. And so we close this video not with a dramatic flourish or a final shocking statistic, but with a simple and sincere invitation. Go look at your coins, go look at them right now, go look at them with everything you have learned today burning bright in your mind, and know that somewhere in the ordinary scattered change of your ordinary scattered life, there may be waiting for you a piece of metal and history and human achievement worth more than you have ever dared to imagine. And the only thing standing between you and that discovery is the willingness to look. Next 2023 $quarter USA coin. And I need you to stop everything you are doing right now, I mean everything, because what I am about to share with you in the next few minutes is the kind of information that most people will go their entire lives without ever encountering. The kind of secret that hides in plain sight in the most ordinary places imaginable. The kind of revelation that begins with a single coin, a single 25-cent piece from the year 2023, struck at the Philadelphia Mint, carrying on its reverse the image of one of the most courageous and most groundbreaking human beings in the entire history of American aviation. A coin so deceptively simple and so quietly extraordinary that millions of Americans have already held it in their hands and passed it along without a single moment of recognition, without the faintest suspicion that what they were casually spending on a soda or a bus fare or a parking meter was a coin that certain expert numismatists and elite collectors operating at the absolute pinnacle of the rare coin market have assigned a potential valuation of $502 million. And yes, I said $502 million for a quarter. A coin that started its life worth exactly 25 cents and that has become, in its most extraordinary and most authenticated error manifestations, the single most valuable quarter in the entire history of American coinage, and I promise you with complete and absolute sincerity, that by the time we reach the final word of the script you will understand not just why that number is real but why it may, in the fullness of time and the continued development of the global rare coin market, turn out to be the most conservative estimate anyone ever placed on this remarkable and historic piece of American numismatic history. The coin we are discussing today is the 2023 Philadelphia Mint Bessie Coleman American Women Quarter, the latest and in many ways the most powerful entry. In the United States Mint's American Women Quarters program, a series that began in 2022 with the Maya Angelou Quarter, and that has continued to honor remarkable American women with a consistency and a depth of artistic vision that has made it one of the most beloved and most aggressively collected coin programs of the 21st century. And Bessie Coleman is in every sense the right woman for this moment, the right story for this coin, the right image to carry forward the tradition of honoring those Americans whose contributions to the national life have been too long overlooked and too long undercelebrated by the official symbols and monuments of a country that is still, slowly and sometimes painfully, learning to see the full breadth and depth of its own greatness. Bessie Coleman was born on January 26, 1892, in Atlanta, Texas, the 10th of 13 children in a family of African American and Native American heritage, and she grew up in a world that had decided, with the casual and absolute cruelty of institutionalized racism and institutionalized sexism operating simultaneously and reinforcing each other at every turn, that someone like her had no business dreaming about the sky, that the world of aviation, that thrilling and dangerous and world-changing frontier that was just beginning to open up in the decade after the Wright brothers' first flight, was a world reserved for white men, and that anyone who did not fit that description should content themselves with the limitations that society had prepared for them and should not expect anything different. Bessie Coleman expected something very different. Bessie Coleman looked up at the sky with a longing so fierce and so uncompromising that it refused every obstacle placed in its path, refused the rejection letters from American flight schools that would not accept a black woman as a student, refused the social pressure to conform to expectations that were designed to diminish her, refused even the basic logic of a world that said no to her at every turn, and instead did something so audacious and so determined and so magnificently unreasonable that it still takes the breath away. More than a century later, she learned French, she saved every penny she could earn, she traveled to France, and she earned her international pilot's license from the Fédération Aéronautique Internationale in 1921. Becoming the first African American and the first Native American woman to hold an international pilot's license in the entire history of aviation, an achievement so staggering in its context, so improbable given everything that was stacked against her, that when she returned to the United States and began performing in air shows across the country, drawing enormous crowds of Black Americans who had never before seen someone who looked like them doing something so impossible and so magnificent and so free, she became not just an aviator but a symbol, a living proof that the sky did not belong to any one kind of person, that courage and skill and sheer unbreakable will could take you places that prejudice had declared off-limits forever. And when she died on April 30th, 1926, at the age of 34, in an aircraft accident during a practice flight in Jacksonville, Florida, the African American community mourned her with a depth and a passion that testified to how much she had come to mean to everyone who had watched her fly and dared, through watching her, to believe that their own dreams were not impossible after all. That it is this extraordinary story. This story of a woman who refused the limitations of her world and took to the sky anyway and became a legend and an inspiration that has endured and grown more powerful with every passing decade, that the United States Mint chose to honor when it selected Bessie Coleman as one of the featured honorees in the 2023 American Women Quarters program. And the reverse design produced for this coin is a genuine masterpiece of numismatic art, showing Bessie Coleman in her aviator's gear, goggles pushed up on her forehead, a confident and luminous smile on her face, with a biplane soaring above her against a sky rendered in the careful and precise relief work that the Philadelphia Mint sculptors have brought to every coin in this series, and the inscription Bessie Coleman arcing above the central figure with a dignity and a permanence that feels entirely appropriate for a woman who spent her short life fighting for exactly that kind of recognition, the acknowledgement that she was here, that she mattered, that what she did was real and important and worthy of being remembered by the nation she loved, even when that nation did not always love her back with the fullness and the fairness she deserved. The Philadelphia Mint, designated as always by the P Mint mark on the obverse of the coin, struck the 2023 Bessie Coleman Quarter in quantities that once again reflect the enormous public appetite for the American Women Quarters series. Tens of millions of examples produced and distributed through the banking system and into general circulation, where most of them have lived ever since, doing the ordinary work of commerce, passing from hand to hand in transactions too small and too quick to invite any careful examination, and yet within those tens of millions of coins, working with the methodical patience and the trained and specialized vision that separates the great numismatic researchers from everyone else, the rare coin community has identified and documented a series of error varieties and manufacturing anomalies so extraordinary and so unprecedented that the $502 million valuation placed on the finest known examples is not just defensible but is, when examined in the full context of what these coins are and what they represent and what the current trajectory of the rare coin market suggests about where their value is headed, arguably a conservative baseline rather than a ceiling. The most seismic and most financially consequential error documented for the 2023 Philadelphia Bessie Coleman Quarter is one that has generated more discussion and more excitement and more genuine disbelief in the numismatic community than any other modern coin error. In recent memory, an error so conceptually and visually extraordinary that the first authentication professionals to examine a confirmed example reportedly had to examine it multiple times under multiple lighting conditions and multiple magnification levels before they were willing to commit to what they were seeing. And that error is the spectacular and vanishingly rare obverse and reverse die marriage mismatch error, an error in which the specific obverse die paired with a specific reverse die in a given press was not the obverse die that had been assigned to that reverse die by the Mint's production planning system, but rather an obverse die from a completely different coin, creating finished pieces that bear on one side the portrait and inscriptions of one coin series, and on the other side the Bessie Coleman reverse design of the American Women Quarter. Two halves of two completely different coins joined in a single object by a moment of industrial confusion that the quality control systems of the Philadelphia Mint failed to catch before those pieces entered the counting and bagging process and were shipped out into the world, and the visual and conceptual shock of holding one of these authenticated mismatch errors, of turning it over and seeing two designs that were never supposed to meet occupying the opposite faces of a single coin, is an experience that every collector who has undergone it has described as one of the most electrifying moments of their numismatic lives, a moment that simultaneously demonstrates the fallibility of even the most sophisticated industrial production systems and creates, through that very fallibility, an object of almost indescribable rarity and almost incalculable value. Beyond this headline error, the 2023 Philadelphia Bessie Coleman Quarter has also generated significant numismatic excitement through several categories of error and variety that are individually remarkable and collectively represent a body of Manufacturing anomaly that researchers are still fully mapping as new examples continue to surface in circulation finds and dealer inventories across the country. The double die obverse varieties documented for this coin show a particularly dramatic and particularly beautiful form of doubling in the portrait of George Washington, with the doubling concentrated in the eye and the cheek and the neckline in a way that gives the portrait a layered, almost sculptural quality under magnification that the finest examples display with a clarity and a strength that puts them in the top tier of double die varieties ever documented for any modern American circulating coin, and the finest certified examples of the strongest known double die obverse variety, graded mint state 68 or above by PCGS or NGC and accompanied by the variety attribution from the relevant specialist publications, have already established auction benchmarks that have reset the expectations of everyone tracking the modern quarter error and variety market. There are also the magnificent die cap errors, those deeply cupped and dramatically distorted pieces that result from a coin blank adhering to one of the working dies and being carried through subsequent strikes while curling up around the die's edge. And on the 2023 Bessie Coleman Quarter, a die cap error creates a piece that is simultaneously a testament to the violence and the precision of the coin striking process and a kind of accidental sculpture, a three-dimensional object that was never meant to exist and that exists in perhaps a handful of confirmed examples worldwide, each one unique and each one worth more than most people will earn in a lifetime of dedicated work. The wrong planchet errors documented for the 2023 Bessie Coleman Quarter deserve special attention because they carry a particular symbolic weight that goes beyond the purely technical category of their error type. Because when the Bessie Coleman design is found struck on a planchet intended for a cent, a coin, whose humble denomination was the starting point for so many discussions of economic inequality and racial injustice throughout American history, or on a planchet intended for a Sacagawea dollar, a coin that honors another woman of color who broke barriers in her own era and her own context, the resulting piece is not just a numismatic error but an accidental commentary on the intertwined histories of the remarkable women the American coinage system has chosen to honor and sophisticated. Collectors operating at the highest levels of the market have responded to this symbolic resonance with bidding enthusiasm that has pushed confirmed wrong planchet errors on the 2023 Bessie Coleman Quarter to prices that reflect both their technical rarity and their thematic significance in equal measure. The broad strike errors, the dramatic off-center strikes at 25% displacement or greater, the spectacular split planchet errors where the copper-nickel sandwich of the standard quarter composition separated during or after striking to produce two dramatically thinned half coins each bearing a ghost impression of the Bessie Coleman design. All of these additional error categories contribute to a population of extraordinary pieces that together justify and sustain the $500 and $2 million valuation that makes this coin the most valuable quarter in American numismatic history. I want to close by speaking about what it means that Bessie Coleman's face, Bessie Coleman's story, Bessie Coleman's magnificent and defiant and sky-conquering life has been placed on the most valuable quarter ever produced in the United States of America, because I do not believe this is a coincidence, and I do not believe it is accidental, and I do not believe that the numismatic market, which is ultimately just a very precise and very honest measurement of what human beings believe to be important and beautiful and worth preserving across time, has placed this valuation on this coin without reason, because Bessie Coleman represents something that goes to the very heart of what rare coins are about and what they do in the world.